Imagine walking into a dealership to buy a brand new car, but instead of handing over cash or swiping a credit card, you drive up a herd of 500 screaming goats. It sounds completely absurd to us today, but for most of human existence, this was not a joke, it was everyday business. Welcome back to the deep history of everything. Today, we are decoding the absolute foundation of human civilization, money. How on earth did we transform from trading live chickens and sacks of grain to stamping shiny metal discs, printing pieces of paper, and eventually tapping invisible digital digits on a glowing glass screen? Before money existed, early societies relied entirely on a concept economists call the double coincidence of wants. If you were a shoemaker who needed bread, you couldn't just find a baker. You had to find a baker who specifically needed new shoes at that exact moment. If he didn't, you went hungry. It was slow, painfully inefficient, and completely paralyzed large-scale trade. But human ingenuity was about to invent a brilliant workaround. For tens of thousands of years, the barter system was the undisputed law of the land. But barter was far more complex than simply swapping goods for goods. It was deeply woven into human social structures, involving promises of labor, shared hunting harvests, and complex tribal favors. Communities functioned entirely on mutual trust and strict reciprocity. However, as small hunter-gatherer tribes evolved into massive agricultural settlements, the fundamental flaws of barter exploded. Goods like fresh fish, milk, or apples decayed rapidly, making them useless for storing wealth long-term. Furthermore, how could an architect trade a built house for everyday necessities without breaking the house into pieces? As human societies grew specialized, direct trade completely collapsed under its own weight. The world was practically begging for a universal medium of exchange, a single language of value that everyone could agree upon. The breakthrough came with commodity money, using raw items that possessed inherent value or extreme desirability. Across ancient Asia, Africa, and the Pacific Islands, small glossy cowrie shells became the premier international currency. They were lightweight, incredibly durable, and virtually impossible to counterfeit because they came directly from the ocean. In other regions, practical commodities took over. Ancient Mayans traded using cacao beans, while the giant Roman Empire relied heavily on salt. Salt was so vital for food preservation that Roman legionnaires were partially compensated with blocks of it, giving birth to the Latin word salarium, which directly became our modern word salary. Yet, commodity money still suffered from major flaws. Carrying thousands of heavy shells or massive blocks of salt across endless, unforgiving deserts proved logistically impossible for international merchants. A more portable solution was required. Then came the Bronze Age, and with it, the ultimate game-changer, metal. Humans quickly realized that metals like bronze, copper, silver, and gold possessed all the ideal qualities of perfect money. They were scarce, practically indestructible, endlessly divisible, and universally admired by every culture on Earth. At first, merchants carried unshaped metal ingots, rings, or raw silver wires. But every single transaction became an agonizing ordeal. A buyer couldn't just hand over a piece of silver, the merchant had to whip out a balance scale to measure its exact weight, then scrape the metal against a touchstone to verify its purity and ensure it wasn't diluted with cheap iron. Carrying scales to buy a simple loaf of bread was exhausting. Trade was still far too slow. To unlock true global wealth, powerful political rulers needed to intervene. In the 7th century BC, in the wealthy kingdom of Lydia, located in modern-day Turkey, King Alyattes engineered a brilliant economic revolution. Instead of letting merchants weigh raw metal, the king stamped standardized lumps of electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver, with the official royal seal of a roaring lion. This royal stamp wasn't just decoration, it was a binding state guarantee. It declared, "This metal weighs exactly this much, and its purity is certified by the king." Instantly, the painful need for scales and touchstones vanished. Transactions that previously took 20 minutes now took 3 seconds. Commerce exploded. Lydia quickly became one of the wealthiest trade hubs in the ancient world, proving to the entire planet that standardized coinage was the ultimate engine for economic power. The Roman Empire took Lydia's invention and scaled it across the known world. They created a standardized, empire-wide financial system anchored by the famous silver denarius. From the rainy borders of Britannia to the sunny grain fields of Egypt, one single currency was accepted everywhere. It built roads, funded massive legions, and enabled global trade on a scale never seen before. However, Rome also discovered a dark, tempting trick. When emperors ran low on money to fund endless wars or lavish lifestyles, they began secretly melting down the silver coins and mixing them with cheap copper. The coins looked the same, but contained far less real silver. As people realized their money was becoming worthless, prices skyrocketed. This early, devastating form of currency devaluation and hyperinflation weakened Rome from within, contributing heavily to the ultimate collapse of the empire. Fast forward to 11th century Song dynasty China. China's economy was booming, but it hit a massive physical bottleneck. Because silver was scarce, the government minted millions of coins out of iron and bronze. To buy a single valuable piece of silk, a merchant had to drag a wooden cart carrying over 100 pounds of heavy iron coins. Tired of breaking their backs, wealthy merchants came up with an ingenious shortcut. They left their heavy metal coins stored in secure private vaults and traveled using lightweight paper deposit receipts instead. Sellers happily accepted these paper notes because they knew they could trade them for real metal at any time. Recognizing the brilliance of this system, the Chinese emperor took control of the process and issued jiaozi, the world's very first official government paper currency. The world had just taken its first step away from physical metal value. In Renaissance Europe, paper money evolved through an unexpected source: local goldsmiths. Because goldsmiths possessed the strongest stone vaults, wealthy citizens paid them small fees to keep their gold coins safe. In return, goldsmiths handed them paper receipts. Soon, people stopped retrieving their gold altogether, opting to simply trade the paper receipts directly in the market. But then, the goldsmiths made a sneaky, world-changing realization. They noticed that only a tiny fraction of customers ever came to withdraw their real gold at any given time. So, goldsmiths began secretly printing extra paper receipts for gold that didn't actually exist, and lending them out to borrowers with interest. Out of thin air, fractional reserve banking was born, creating vast amounts of new capital that funded global trade, exploration, and the Industrial Revolution. For most of the 19th and 20th centuries, paper money was anchored by the gold standard, meaning every printed dollar or pound could theoretically be exchanged for physical gold in a government vault. But in 1971, U.S. President Richard Nixon officially severed the U.S. dollar's connection to gold, ushering in the modern era of fiat money. Fiat is Latin for, let it be done, meaning currency holds value purely because governments decree it, and citizens trust it. Today, we are standing on the brink of yet another monumental transformation. Physical cash is rapidly vanishing from daily life. Money has converted into digital lines of code moving through global banking networks. And now, decentralized technologies like Bitcoin are challenging the system once again, replacing trust in central governments with unchangeable mathematical algorithms on the blockchain. When you look back across thousands of years, you realize a shocking truth. Money was never actually about cowrie shells, shiny gold coins, paper notes, or digital bits. Money has always been a grand social technology, a shared system of human trust that allows total strangers to cooperate and exchange their time, energy, and creativity. As technology leaps forward, the way we store human effort will keep evolving, but the core need for trust will never change. If you found this deep dive into financial history fascinating, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below letting us know, what historical invention should we decode next? Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.